Well, hello there, fellow cultists. This is DM Nell, and I am coming to you with another episode of Shadow the Demon Lord Talk. And this time we are on episode 50, 50 something, 58. Wow. Okay, 58. And I wanted to take this episode, which is going to be a longer one, simply because the material I'm going to cover is a fairly long supplement, and it is the one that I'm showing on my screen here, Exquisite Agony. So this is an older book. It came out within, I think, a couple years of the game actually being released. Here's the actual book. And it's a great supplement. It's a great book. I'm not even sure I'd call it a supplement. It's kind of, if you're running a game in the setting, in the core setting, then it's not really a supplement. It's more of a setting book with supplemental rules in it. But hold on, I gotta get comfortable. Oh, okay. So from that regard, it's actually pretty core to the material provided for running games on the world of Earth, because it provides a lot of information regarding a place called Hell. And you may have heard of Hell. It's famous for many terrible things in the real world, but in the setting, it is also known for many bad things. But I am getting ahead of myself. So what is in this book? Well, we got some lore, and then we've got some monsters, and then we've got an adventure, and then we got some character material. So let's just kind of sift through all that and see if this is a book that you might be interested in. So first of all, we have all of the credits here, and we can thank Mr. Schwab for writing, design, and art direction. Jennifer Clark Wilkes, seen her name in a lot of D&D stuff. She does the editing, proofreading by Kara Hamilton, Dan Heinrich. Hope I pronounced that right. Dan, sorry if I didn't. Graphic design and layout by Kara Hamilton, and cover art by Mirko Paganesi. That's Mirko's work there. Good stuff. And then interior illustrations by Biagio de Alessandro. I'm sure I didn't say that right. Ivan Dixon, Jack Kaiser, Britt Martin, Mirko Paganesi, Svetoslav Petrov, and Bob Schwab. And then cartography by Cecil Howe and Andy Law. So lots of good work by lots of good people there. Moving on, here's a table of contents. Not really going to dwell on that. And then we have Welcome to Hell. So this kind of just explains what this book is about. And I'm not going to go through that because we're going to go through the book. But this gives a pretty quick summary as to what Hell is and what it means to the game. All right, so the root of evil. This kind of goes into a lot of the lore of Earth, particularly with the Fae and how they came into power. And it turns out that the Fae have the power that they have, or I should say, when I'm talking about the Fae, I'm talking actually about the Fae lords, or the Fae kings and queens, the powerful Fae that rule the Fae races or whatever. So we're talking about Titania, we're talking about Diabolus, we're talking about the Horn King, the Mother Earth, or Earth Mother, I forget what they call her. But anyway, all of those powerful Fae have their beginnings, and their beginnings as far as climbing to power are talked about here. So basically, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here because you can read it for yourself when you buy the book. But basically, what happened was back, in the prehistory of the world, the Fae were concerned that the mortals, and that would be like the human races, all the races that have a soul that go through the cycle of life and are reborn once they die into a new body. And they were afraid that these newcomers would eventually grow in power such that they would threaten the Fae. And the reason for that is because at the time there was no limit to the whole cycle of life. When somebody died and was reincarnated, when they were reborn, they retained all the memories from their past life. So everything that they learned, all the lessons that they learned, everything was retained. And so they would build upon that knowledge in their next life, and then in their next life, and eventually, the races would be able to, grow in power and threaten the Fae. And so the Fae were really concerned about this. One in particular was very concerned, and that was one of the Fae lords named Diabolus. And Diabolus was, he didn't like what he saw with the mortal races, so he decided he was going to do something about it. And he tried to talk the other Fey lords and ladies into helping him out, but they weren't into it. They were not really wanting to mess with the mortals directly like that. But Diabolus didn't really see another way out. So what he decided to do was to go out into the Fey races disguised as one of them, or not the Fey races, but the mortal races, and he would go disguised as one of them, and he would start developing these legends of these great gods, or what we call the old gods now. Back then, it was probably just the gods, and he would talk about Father Death, and he would talk about the Horned Lord, and he would talk about the Summer Queen, and all of these, over the centuries of him going out and spreading the word of all of these gods out there. Eventually, these gods grew a following, and religions rose out of this, and the whole, what we refer to as the Old Faith now, or what's referred to as the Old Faith now, had its roots with Thanatos, actually, or not Thanatos, but Diabolus actually going out and spreading the seeds for this religion to be born. Now, what happened was an unintended consequence of this, or maybe it was intended because Diabolus is pretty smart and pretty tricky, was that as these religions grew and as mortals began to invest belief and faith into these god figures, the people who Thanatos associated with these god figures, the Fey lords and ladies, became the recipient of unintended spiritual power that flowed into them, granting them godlike power. So, by virtue of the worship of the mortals, so it's kind of asked backwards. By virtue of the worship of the old gods by the mortals, the old gods were born and became gods. So, in a way, man created God. So that's how the Old Faith was born. And it was all due to Thanatos, or not Thanatos. I want to keep wanting to say Thanatos. Thanatos became Father Death, actually, and so, but Diabolus, he became, the devil. And because they had to have a bad guy, so he kind of cast himself in that role. And with all of this power flowing into these Fey lords and ladies, what happened was the power actually changed them physically. It morphed them into the figure that their worshippers envisioned these beings having. So, for example, Thanatos became Father Death, and so he was morphed into this skeleton with eye sockets burning with blue flames and swaddled in darkness. That's what it says right here. So, the Horned Lord became this massive, beast man with, antlers and, the Maiden in the Moon. I'm not really sure what she looks like, but, the Summer Queen became this beautiful but horrible summer beauty. So anyway, all this to say is that Diabolus actually created or facilitated the creation of the old gods. All right, so the Fae were freaking out when all this was happening. So they went to Diabolus and basically said, put a stop to this. And he's like, nope. And so Diabolus is like, you know what? We're going to have to deal with this. And you have me to thank for all your newfound power. So here's what I want. I want a place to call my own, and I want a tithing of souls. And I forgot a bit. So back up a little bit. So using some of this power, the Fae actually created a way to funnel all of the dead souls that came out of the mortal world into a place where they can kind of hold on to them for a little bit and enable these souls to just kind of forget about their past life before they move on to a new body. So the place they created was the Underworld. And Father Death, or Thanatos, was assigned the role of Keeper of the Underworld. So as people died, as mortals died, their souls would go into the Underworld, and Father Death would hold on to them, and they would die. They would be so bored that they would forget their past lives eventually, and then once they had no memory left of their past lives, and off you go get born again. So that was the purpose of the Underworld. So the Underworld was created. And then Diabolus was like, okay, so yeah, we created the Underworld. We created, these other places like Elysium for those special souls that were above and beyond. Those are the exceptional heroes and great thinkers that the Fae didn't want to necessarily lose that skill set. So that would be kind of like a prison for the good stock. That was like it was an actual prison, but it was actually created to be like a heaven for these people. So they would be catered to. Every wish would be granted. Every whim would be provided to them. So it was basically heaven for these souls, but it was actually a prison so that they couldn't get out and spread their knowledge and all that stuff. So, so Diabolus, he's like, okay, so, I made it so that we had this power. Now I want my cut. And what I want is I want a tithing of souls, and I want a place to call my own, and basically be left alone. And so the other Fae eventually gave in, and the World Mother carved out a underground or an underworld place for Diabolus, which he called Hell. And it was a place where his tithing of souls from the other Faes would be sent. But he would also take those troublesome souls that were corrupt. Now, the problem with corruption is that it endangers a soul into becoming more like what the soul started off as. And every soul started off as a demon. So every mortal that has a soul is actually a demon that was transformed into a mortal when the soul was trapped in this universe. And so the Fae didn't want these souls reverting back to demons, because then it would have a world full of demons, and nobody wants that. So they had to find a way to get rid of this corruption that people would accumulate throughout their mortal lives. And so Diabolus basically stepped up and said, yeah, I got this. So send me the corrupt me and my followers will we will we will work with them and help them get rid of their corruption. And once they're done, we will usher them back off into the world to get reborn. So the other Fae were okay with this. So he became the devil, and he basically, he carved out his own kingdom in hell. So that is essentially a simplified version of the background of how hell came into being. And it is actually a physical place, just like the underworld is a physical place. This is an underworld place somewhere within the bowels of Earth. And there are only a few ways to get into. Actually, there's only 3 ways to get into hell. And those are described here in the Finding Hell section. One hidden entrance of hell is actually in the city of Caicrus, and it's called Gaethera, something like that. Anyway, and the city of Caicrus is kind of built on top of it, and this entrance to hell kind of makes the whole area of Caicrus a special place of power, such that it actually attracted the wizards from Is to create their floating citadel, because this was there was a concentration of power in this region. And one of the reasons for that is because there's an entrance to hell here. A temple was built over the entrance of hell, and there's a staircase within the temple that actually descends into the hill that is built upon and down into the actual underworld of hell. So that is one of the entrances. Another one is the Tartarian Gates. And this entrance to hell is nestled between 2 active volcanoes in the Fire Peaks within a great cave. And so it describes that entrance. And then finally, the third entrance is actually under the ocean, the Nixian Ocean, and it is in a trench called the Fuming Trench. And so that one's a little harder to get to, I think, than the other 2. But at any rate, those are the 3 ways into hell. Now, there may be other entrances that aren't either known or that aren't as easily accessible, but those are the 3 that are known. I'm actually working on an adventure where a new entrance has been created, either through an earthquake or through some natural event. And so, you can do stuff like that if you want to. It may be a temporary entrance, or it may be a new permanent entrance, or whatever. But, if you just want to work with what has already been established in the lore, there are 3. Okay, so the next section here, Hell Revealed, basically just talks about the actual physical realm of hell and how terrible it is. So we kind of go down to the hellish terrain, and it talks about the different types of terrain that you'll find there. You've got stinking bogs, which are pools of boiling excrement that can be found throughout hell, often with a few damned souls waiting in the mess. Talks about the badness that happens if you actually fall into one, or get within range of breathing the fumes from one. Talks about that there, so I'm not going to go through that. If you fall into it, it does d6 damage to the creature that touches, 3d6 damage to a creature immersed in it. So yeah, bad stuff. Then we got the prickly dunes. Now, prickly dunes are great heaps of gray sand slowly creeping across hell's landscape as they're blown by the fetid winds. So the prickly dunes are actually, it's not sand, but it's actually ground up shards of bone. And as it is picked up by the wind and blown across hell, it could actually cause some problems. A prickly dune typically spreads 20 plus 1d20 yards across and reaches a maximum height of 10 plus 2d6 yards. A creature that falls prone on the dune takes D3 damage from the jagged bits of detritus. Detritus, making up the pile. So, bad news there. Cinder fields, these are burning coals that make up a lot of the landscape. And of course, burning causes problems, especially if you have to walk across it. The hot coals deal 1 damage at the end of each round to any creature on them without suitable foot protection. So, having to walk across cinder fields is not fun. Glistening pools. So there's not a whole lot of fresh water in hell, and to make it worse, there are pools that look like fresh water, but they're not. There are these glistening pools. Actually, I'm thinking of thirst water up here. So let me refresh my memory on glistening pools. Far rarer and smaller than these stinking bogs, glistening pools are puddles of silvery or yellow slime, usually 1 to 3 yards in diameter. Some stand open while others are covered in a thin layer of dust. If a mortal creature touches the pool's surface, the thick viscous fluid crawls up and over the creature's body. The creature must make a strength challenge roll and a will challenge roll. On a failure, you gain a d6 insanity and 1 corruption. Failure on the strength roll, the fluid seeps into the creature's flesh and disappears. Thereafter, the creature, whenever they complete a rest, must make a strength challenge roll with a bane, plus an additional bane per prior failure. If it gets a failure on this roll, its abdomen begins to swell. After the 3rd failure, the creature gains 1d3 insanity, takes 46 damage, and violently births a bogey that frees itself by tearing out of the creature's stomach. So there you go. That's what a glistening pool is. Now let me go ahead and jump down to the thirst water, because that's what I was thinking that was. Thirst water is pools of water that look fresh and drinkable, but it actually makes you more thirsty. So actual drinking water is available in hell, but it is closely guarded by greater devils. So to get fresh water, you actually have to deal with the greater devils to get access to it. And then you have shard forests, less common than other forms of special terrain. These thick patches of razor-sharp crimson crystals thrust up from the ground almost like trees. In a forest, the crystals have a mirror finish, and anyone looking in their surface sees a reflection of themselves, wounded, bleeding, and broken. Touching a crystal causes it to explode in a 5-yard radius from the point it was touched, the fragments dealing 3d6 damage to everything except other such crystals in the area. A creature that gets a success on agility challenge roll takes half damage. So lots of terrible, terrible terrain just walking through hell. So if you ever run a campaign in hell where your characters are physically in hell, not just a spirit, then definitely take advantage of this terrain type, because this is some nasty stuff. All right, so the next section talks about notable locations in hell. So the first thing that you would notice when you go into hell is the Unsun. Now, the Unsun is depicted here. And the World Mother, when she created hell, is basically a hole within the earth. So there was no warmth. There was no, other than the heat of the planet itself, there was no light. So you couldn't see anything. So what she decided to do was create a sun-like body of energy within hell to illuminate the place. And so that's what the Unsun is. It's basically a burning ball of fire that's suspended in the sky above hell, within the hellish cavern. And every once in a while, it will send out this tendril of flame, kind of like a solar flare, that just kind of touches the landscape of hell and burns anything that happens to touch. So it's got a description of what that looks like. You could take up to 5d6 damage on a failed agility challenge roll when one of these things comes down and decides to lick all over you. All right, so there's a place called the Osseous Spire. This is a crooked tower standing on top of a mound of skulls, and I believe that's what's depicted here. And this is the domain of the Boned Prince, whose actual name is Marcosius. And Marcosius is like the bone specialist. He is like the dude that has created bone machines, and he's like the go-to guy if you want something made out of bone. So there's actually an adventure that was, I believe, a novice adventure called Blood Will Run, and it features a bone weapon called the Gore Blades, and this dude is responsible for making those. So this kind of ties into that adventure a little bit in that regard. So it doesn't really give a whole lot of detail on the bone prints, and I'm assuming that's who is depicted here. But it's, excellent idea. This would be a great villain for a campaign or for an expert tier or a master tier adventure. So bone prints. Heaving Gormons. These are statues, bronze statues of considerable size, which lines both sides of an 18-mile long road paved with obsidian tiles in the shape of six-pointed stars, glossy and clean. The statues depict corpulent men bent double, mouths open as if retching. At random intervals, one or more of statues vomit wet sacks of tissues that contain warped forms of devils reborn into hell after being driven from the mortal world. So these are the Heaving Gormans, and I don't think it says where this is at, and I'm not sure it's on the map. There's actually a map in here of hell, but it is fairly high level, and I don't see the Heaping Gormans. So I would assume then that you could probably place it wherever you wanted to in here. But at any rate, so devils are reborn into hell after being expelled from the mortal world, and they come out here. You got the Weeping Wood, which I believe I saw on the map down there. Many forests grow in hell. They are all brooding places of darkness, tricking the senses with strange sounds and half-glimpsed images. So you got basically a terrible Weeping Wood. The Silent City. This is a city that rises from the center of a broken and blasted landscape, shrouded by toxic mist vented from fissures that snap open and shut with little warning. Resembles a forest of blackened spires with narrow, shadow-drenched streets wending between them. The city is utterly silent and seems to swallow all noise. So it's not just a clever name. Shades gather in the darkness, watching the streets for signs of their tormentors, skittering away when they sense a threat or surging out. So another interesting locale. If you have an adventure in hell, you could have them stumble across a silent city. There is a thing that could threaten them, a danger that's listed here, a mist that can cause some damage. So you want to read up on that. Then we have the Lake of Fire. Gargoyles and Shedem use tridents to prod the damned into the burning fluid. So this is kind of what you would kind of really envision hell to be, as far as souls, lamenting souls in a pool of burning, fire, basically. That's typically what you think of when you think of hell, and it's actually depicted on the cover. So I'm not going to scroll back to the cover, but you can see here. That is basically what this is. This is the Lake of Fire. Those are gargoyles that are prodding the souls into the fiery water. So, good times. Then you got the Shadow Market. This is, even hell has commerce, and this is where you go to buy stuff. And typically, the stuff you find in hell is not stuff you would find elsewhere. The thing with the Shadow Market, though, is that they don't take standard coinage that you would shop with on the surface of the world. Instead, they deal with souls for the most part, and corruption, I believe. So, or souls with corruption, which makes sense because you're in hell. So the higher the corruption, the greater the worth of the soul. So if you want to buy something, you got to have a soul to barter with. Actually, just entering the Shadow Market gives you 1 corruption. So Yeah, it's a nasty place. But if you go there, you can find a bevy of enchanted objects, exotic items, forbidden goods, and incantations from nearly every tradition inscribed on surfaces ranging from wax tablets to the backs of slaves whose eyes and mouths have been sewn shut. So yeah, great place. What else we have here? We got the sorrowful gardens. So it's a garden with horrible statuary. So that would be an interesting place to stop by if you're in an adventuring there. And here's a table of hellish sights, so you can see anything from a hollow, moving, huge construct built to resemble a city and crawling with hideous creatures, all the way down to a large gray box with a pinhole-looking crowded with books, and a bearded man seemingly dead slumped over a desk against the far wall, and then a bunch of stuff in between. So interesting sights that you might come across when you are walking through hell. What else we have here? Clouded clouds. So you'll see some clouds in the sky above the underworld of hell, not the underworld, but the underworld of hell. Mucus bog. This is just like it sounds. This is a bog, many miles. Basically, it is gross bodily fluids and stuff. Knotted briar. I'm just going to skip through some of this stuff. The knotted briar, if you have to walk through that, you take a D3 damage per yard traveled within. So that's it's difficult. Might be something good to put around a greater demon or greater devil's lair. The furnaces. At first, what looks like a castle perched atop a low hill reveals its rounded turrets to be enormous smokestacks topping 4 walk-in ovens. In the covered courtyard between them are rows upon rows of tables upon which are strapped the damned, waiting to be hacked apart by butchers. Dungeons burrow deep under the hill below the castle where souls await in tiny, cramped cells to be dismembered and cooked. Some cells stand empty, awaiting the soul's return after being devoured by the furnace's gluttonous master, a hideous devil known as the Maw. So that's one of the devil lords, the Maw, and where he lives. Heaving Hills. Curious range of denuded hills wrap around scummy bog. The hills weep runny, opaque yellow fluid that dribbles down. Blah, 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 blah. And a living creature that drinks from it must make a strength challenge roll with 3 banes, taking damage equal to its health. On a failure, on a success, it takes damage equal to its healing rate and becomes poisoned until it completes a rest. So Heaving Hills with some nasty fluid that you don't want to drink. Hellish happenings. So these are some things that can happen. Anything from a geyser of blood erupting from the ground, spraying over the area within medium range, all the way down to one item carried or worn by a random member of the group worth 1 silver or less turns to thick yellow-white slime. So these are things that can happen while you're in hell, just by being there. Let's see what else. A scabby blight. A thick crust of dried blood and pus covers the ground in this bowl-shaped depression. Trapped in the mess, preventing from moving, are scores of damned souls who earned corruption from thievery. So you got some thieves trapped in this scabby blight. They are helpless to resist these scrabbling claws, as tiny monsters with the climber trait. So scrabbling claws are monsters that are in the hole and that pick their way across the ground to snip at their victims' extremities. There's a corkscrew worm, which sounds pretty horrible. Parasites gathering the stuff. In particular, corkscrew worm prevents a serious threat to anyone exploring sight. Blood red, about 6 inches long, twice the thickness of a hair. It appears harmless until a living creature draws near. When a living creature moves within 5 yards of a patch so infested, the worm launches itself from the ground at the triggering creature. The creature must get a success on an agility challenge roll, and a failure. The worm lands on the creature's body and immediately burrows into its skin, remaining there for 2d6 days. And I'm sure nothing bad happens after that. And actually, a creature with a corkscrew worm lodged in its body takes penalty to its health equal to its healing rate, but gains a +1 bonus to strength, agility, intellect, and will. When the time runs out, the unfortunate host becomes stunned for 1 minute as painful cramps and waves of nausea assail its body. The creature then messily blasts a pile of bloody worms from its butthole, or its anus, taking 66 damage from the sudden painful release. The worms spring at living creatures within 5 yards of the former host, with the same effect as described above. Yeah, good stuff. All right, the Blood Sea. There is a Blood Sea. It's on the map that I showed you earlier. I'm sure there's some nasty stuff in it. There's vessels are able to navigate the Blood Sea, are propelled by oars or pulled by massive sharks. Well, of course there are sharks in hell, because sharks are created by the devil himself. I hate sharks. What else? No Hope. One of the few communities here held by living mortal creatures. No Hope grew soon after hell began receiving tithes of souls from the hidden kingdoms. The people sent to hell wind up here if they aren't turned into hogmen first. It's a mid-sized city of ramshackle buildings and twisted mud streets, crawling with a dizzying array of wretched folks, from children to the elderly. Those condemned to this place fight to protect what little they have, but the devils prey on them, corrupting them or transforming them into new devils to replace other fiends that have fell in service to hell. So this is an actual community of mortals. So these would be physical creatures, physical people. I might have to use that in the adventure I'm planning. All right, so the Devil's Fork. 2 corkscrew towers stab up from the tip of Mount Sorrow, the tallest mountain in hell, which looms above the Lake of Fire. The towers flank a mighty stronghold built to resemble a fanged human skull. Castle Grayskull? No. The green flames of bonfires in its eye sockets casting a sickly light over the lands below. Here the devil rules over the worst of all the torments hell can offer. So the Devil's Fork is where Diabolus calls home. So here's a map of all that stuff, or some of that stuff I should say. Here's the Blood Sea. Here's the Silent City. Here's the Weeping Wood. Here's the Devil's Fork that we just read about. Scabby Blight, Plain of Burdens. We haven't gotten to that one yet. Heaving Hills. All right, so lots of good stuff. There's the furnaces. Okay. Iron Fields, jagged plains of rusted iron provide the only haven from devils in hell, a place Diabolus had made to punish those servants who angered him. Here, exiled devils are stripped of their clothing and lie writhing and screaming in pain from constant contact with the hated metal. Halls of the Lost. And let's just kind of skip through some of these. You can read them in more detail once you purchase this lovely product. Acheron, the River of Woe, flows through a deep channel across much of hell. So that's one way that you could navigate hell, is on Acheron. And so that is basically like the river Styx, I'm thinking. City of the Damned. This great noisy city of devils stands on the opposite side of hell from Devil's Fork. High walls encircle the place, the battlements manned by Furies, and the occasional Gorgon. City's interior is a veritable maze of buildings. This is where the souls of tax collectors and civil servants go to, I assume. Those of you that remember Beetlejuice. But really, seriously, this is a city of devils. So, you can kind of make it what you want. Plain of Burdens, we just saw that up there. Relatively flat stretch of stones extends for miles. The hard surface covered with grit and tattered shreds of people who died there. A particular note are the hundreds of stone blocks scattered across the place, each weighing several tons. The block sits atop the damned slowly pressing them flat. Lovely. Tormentors and other devils patrol the area to ensure none disturb the crushed or to drag new blocks on top of prisoners who find their way here. The Abyss. All right. The Abyss. Acheron drops away into a tremendous cataract when it reaches the great bottomless pit known as the Abyss. Enormous monsters called behemoths cling to the walls, feeding on the choice treasures delivered to them by the rushing waters, or clamber up the side to rage about the surrounding lands until they turn to stone. The pit is truly bottomless, descending a mile until it reaches the void. So this is kind of reminiscent of some scenes I've seen in video games where you just have towering, just enormous creatures in hellish places. So that's kind of what imagery that brings to my mind. Hanging Forest. A great expanse of forest lies nestled between two lines of jagged hills. The trees here have red, hairy bark and ivory leaves that chime when the wind blows through the branches, hanging by their necks from the boughs on cords woven from human hair, one per tree, are the twisting, writhing bodies of the damned. If cut free, the lemurs offer no thanks, only curses and violence. So, yeah, thank you very much. All right, escaping hell. It's not easy to get out of hell, but it can be done. And this describes some ways to do it. I'm not going to read through that. Here we have a picture of Diabolus himself. So he's looking pretty badass on his throne of bone and skulls. So yeah, if you want if you want to fight the devil, that's what you're up against right there. All right, Hell's denizen. So you got Diabolus and you have greater devils, and they go on to describe a lot of stuff here. So this box text right here basically tells you how Diabolus is related to the cult of the new god. And all my videos are spoilers. So if you're watching this and you don't want to be spoiling anything, then don't watch, because all my videos have spoilers about all things Shadow of the Demon Lord. This is a video mostly for GMs. This one in particular is mostly for GMs because, players really shouldn't be knowing about this stuff. So consider yourself warned. Now, Diabolus, and the cult of the new god. So Diabolus decided, he's the devil. Yeah, he's got power. But he decided that's not enough. He wants to get a new revenue stream, as it were. And so he decided to create the cult of the new god. So he actually presented himself to a mortal who ended up being the Saint Astrid, and he basically through this vision he presented himself as the new god and tasked Astrid with being the deliverer of his word. So he created yet another religion and set himself up as the new god, the sole new god. Now, last time he did this, he shared the wealth with all the rest of his Fey lords and ladies. But this time he's keeping this one to himself. So he created the new god, and with the birth of the religion of the new god, he started getting the power of the new god. Now, the problem with the new god is that there's no depiction of the new god. So we don't really know what effect this new influx of faith power that's going into Diabolus is doing to him. But we do know that it is changing him. So as a result, he's kind of locked himself up in his castle and has really just kind of checked out from ruling hell, which leaves the rest of the greater devils to rule the place on his behalf. And, the greater devils are kind of like, they're all wanting to be the new devil. So they're all, plotting against each other and making alliances and breaking alliances and all that stuff to try to get a step ahead of their rivals. So this talks about the various greater devils and gives a little bit paragraph or two description of each one of them, which I think there's only a handful listed here, but there could be more depending on what you want to do with your campaign. But you got Olal, the Desire in Flesh. Abaddon, the Warfather, Gothera, the Sower of Dissent. You've got Tilahar, the Mother of Filth, Ithritonus, the Deceiver, Zutab, the Obscene, and like I said, you could create others if you wanted to. In fact, the Bone Prince is probably a greater devil. All right, so we now go into a short description of the other denizens of hell. You got the devils, you've got monsters, you've got the damned, and you have outsiders, which are people that actually make their way into hell that aren't dead and get stuck there or whatnot. Then you got the rewards and discoveries section. So if you go into hell, there's a chance you're going to find stuff that is worthwhile. Those things could be corrupted objects. It talks about temptation and corruption. You could make an infernal bargain with a greater devil, or with any devil, actually. I think all the devils have the power to make some sort of bargain. It kind of describes all of that here. Summoning a devil is described. Infernal service. Summoner can request a service from a summoned devil. Infernal gift. Devils can provide a gift to people that they deal with, and some of those gifts are listed here. Talks about gives a corruption cost and the devil's difficulty number there, which I'm sure has to do with something. But anyway, if you're interested in doing a campaign in hell, you would definitely want to read up on this, because more than likely your characters are going to come up against a devil or one or more devils that will want to make bargains. After all, these are fae, and the faerie are known for bargaining. That's what they like to do. So there you go. Fleeting rewards, wishes, infernal pacts, benefits of those, and hellish attention, which is at the end of each rest character completes, the devil gains 1d3 diabolical schemes that remain until expended. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, read through all that if you are actually going to be interacting with devils and wanting to have some of those things incorporated in your game. Diabolical objects. These are some enchanted objects that are hell-themed, so you can create your own. There are some hellish relics that are already created for you here. The Book of the Damned, Hellfire Wand, Icon of the Adversary, and the Soulfire Blade, which is actually the sword of the Witch King. It was gifted to the Witch King by somebody in hell, probably Diabolus. And it eventually makes its way back to hell from time to time, and then finds its way back to the surface world from time to time. So the Soulfire Blade is a badass blade. Trader's Mask. And then we get into the monster section. So pretty cool monsters. Angels are actually devils, if you can wrap your brain around that, which it really shouldn't be too hard, because in Catholic faith, or Christian faith, I should say, devils are actually angels. So, they're just kind of flip sides of each other. But in this game, angels are actually devils that look pretty, but their real form is not. So they may come across as being holier than thou and trying to do something good, but in actuality, everything they touch turns to shit and serves hell. So those are the angels for you. They're difficulty 50. The Behemoth, we talked about that above. These are difficulty 750. And I think this is the first supplement that introduced a difficulty that's between 500 and 1,000. So 750 is it. And these are size 10 horrifying demons. Pretty badass. A bogey, this is what pops out of your belly if you drink that stuff in that one place that I talked about earlier. A butcher. Butchers are only a difficulty 25, but they're pretty tough devils. The reason for that is because they have the severability. They're towed around a cleaver, and whenever they make an attack, they only +4 to hit, but they get 3 boons. So they do 2d6 damage, which isn't all that much for a difficulty 25 creature, but they also get to roll on this table. And this table is what makes them dangerous. So if they roll a 1, the creature takes 2d6 extra damage. Okay, yeah, that's not that bad. If they roll a 2, the butcher severs part of the left arm, starting with the fingers, hand, arm below the elbow, and finally the arm below the shoulder, in that order if they roll this more than one time. Number 3 is as 2 except for the right arm. Number 4, you start with the legs. Number 5 is the other leg. And then finally, you cut the head off. So, yeah, this is only a 1-to-6 table, with a 6 being an auto kill for creatures that have a head. So, yeah, difficulty 25. These guys are tough. Actually, they're dangerous, I should say. They're not that tough because they only have 31 health, but still, they're dangerous. All right, Cambion. You know, when mortals and devils hook up, you get a Cambion, so that's that. You got a Chimera here, another 750. Difficulty creature, size 3, and it's got a lion's head, a goat head, and a serpent head. What's interesting about these is that each head is separated as a separate stat block here for their attacks. So that would be a pretty tough monster to fight, I would imagine. It's got where is it? It's got defensive 19. Its health is special, so each head has its own health, I believe. So anyway, I'm not going to read through that, but those, the Chimera is a pretty tough monster. Devilkins are, size 1/2 devils. I think there's one depicted up here. I think that's a Devilkin. Let's see, what else do we have? Familiar. Okay, so yeah, this is a devil that is created to be a familiar. It takes the form of a cat, a bird, a rat, a toad, or some other small creature. All right, we have a gargoyle. That's what is depicted on the cover with the pitchfork there. So gargoyles aren't actual gargoyles in what you would imagine from D&D. They're not stony skinned creatures with wings, and I believe that the gargoyle statuary that the word gargoyle usually comes from in the real world probably are depicting the actual gargoyles in hell that stick the pitchforks into the burning lake to keep the souls burning. That's just my guess, but at any rate, the gargoyles in this game are the creatures depicted on the cover there. Gaunts. Gaunts are thin, faceless humanoids with rubbery black skin, made slick by the black milk-like substance dribbling from their pores. 2 horns curl out from the side of the gaunt's head to wrap around its face until the points nearly touch. Membranous wings spread from its back, and a long tail, looking much like an umbilical cord capped with a bone barb, extends from the base of its spine. So that's a nasty sounding creature. Difficulty 10. Then you got the Hogman. Hogman was mentioned earlier. In accordance with the bargain struck between the old gods and the devil, the fairies give tithes of souls to hell once delivered to the eager devils. They're divided into groups. The corrupted, if still alive, are auctioned off in the soul markets to the greater devils, while the pure are led off to be dunked in great vats filled with boiling bile and then pulled free as hogmen. So there you go. Hogmen are uncorrupted souls that make their way to hell and transformed into hogmen. All right, Ifrit. This is an Ifrit. Towering creature, looks a lot like Surtur. So like a fire giant, basically. Difficulty 500. Fires of Hell. There you go. That's an Ifrit. Size 3 creature. Then you have an Incubus and a Succubus. Everybody should know what those are. These are difficulty 750. That's surprising. I'm not really sure why they're so tough, but there you go. Lemurs. Lemurs are the souls that reach hell, are kind of transformed into these, small fleshy lumps of things. called Lemurs. And so, well, actually, and that's what they are in other games. But in this game, it looks like they appear just as they did in life, though always pale with bruises under their eyes. Over time, hell takes a toll on their bodies and minds. The flesh displays the torments they've endured, and most gibber and whine. So I guess these lemurs in Shadow of the Demon Lord look like they did in life, but they just accumulate a bad appearance after spending time in hell. Okay, so not the squatty. I actually have some right up here. Oh no, these are mains. That's what I was thinking of. But anyway, so those are your lemurs. Then you have the malabranch. Let's see, malabranch. What are these monsters? They are. They have gnarled bodies covered in scales with horns curling up from their brows. Exaggerated facial features, overlarge eyes, noses, mouths, chins, and ears. All right, these are difficulty 100 devils. They have 2 attacks and they corrupt. All right. Seraphim, curling and writhing in the boiling or roiling flames of the unsun, the seraphim appear as whip-like tendrils of fire with white burning eyes. Hatred burns hot in their hearts and rages in flames around them as when they fly. When seraphim escape the inferno that birthed them, they ripple through the air, driven by some unholy impulse to burn everything to ash. Awesome. The Shedim follow the lemurs into hell, shadowing their movements and dragging them off. They have humanoid shapes and coarse, pebbly gray skin. Wide, idiotic grins split their ugly faces. And they love to touch and paw at their victims before pulling them apart with rooster claws they have in place of feet. Nice. All right, Termagant. These are the big sword-armed devils. I believe I made a token in one of my token sets for one of these guys. These are difficulty 250. They have sword arms. Enough said. Tormentor. These guys are terrible. These guys are what I would expect to see in a Clive Barker movie, one of his Hellraiser movies. Yeah, eyes sewn shut. They got a ball gag in their mouth. I mean, yeah, they're just awful. They sweat this black liquid. They emit pain. So tormentors are difficulty 100 and size 2 horrifying creatures. Then we have the Zebul, or Zabul. Zabul are 18 feet tall, but they slouch, bent over almost in half so that they can mutter in mortals' ears. They have smooth, round heads perched on long, veiny necks, bulging eyes, and wide, sensuous lips from which that one can just catch the faintest whiff of shit. Nice. From pear-shaped bodies extend long, spindly arms and legs. This sounds like a Tim Burton creation. So Zebul is a difficulty 100, size 3 monster. I'm going to have to create a token for that because that's just too evocative a description. All right, so we now are down to the adventure portion of Exquisite Agony, and this is a novice adventure. I actually have not run this yet, but it basically is, as it says here, this adventure. The characters join a pilgrimage, making its way through and around the heart of the Northern Reach. As they travel, they have a chance to witness firsthand how the devils sink their claws into mortals and prey upon the negative emotions in their hearts, goading them to evil ends. So this is, I don't think this adventure is set in hell. It sounds like it is actually set in the Northern Reach and just kind of gives the starting characters a glimpse as to how devils interact with the mortal world. I haven't run it. I haven't really even read it all the way through. I've kind of skimmed it. So I really can't provide a whole lot of feedback or information on the adventure itself, if it's any good. But I do believe that one of Rob Schwab's actual play videos may have this adventure featured in it. I'm thinking, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong there, but there you go. All right, so if we skip past the the adventure, we get to the character information. So you have hellbound characters with diabolical backgrounds. New story complications. Story complications are something that came out of the Demon Lord's Companion book. New marks of darkness. Love marks of darkness. Worshipping the devil. You can play a Cambion. And let's see what's great about Cambions. Well, they have dark sight. That's nice. Bestow corruption. You can give corruption, but giving corruption to NPCs, I don't know how great that is. All right, so that's that. And it talks about the different paths that they can take. So they can take an expert path called an apostate, master path known as Diabolus. Then you got witch hunters. Some diabolical spells that are listed here. And what do we have? Gias, that sounds familiar. Tempt, Ecstasy, Hellfire Bolt. Oh, that sounds cool. Hellfire Blast sounds even cooler. So, familiar, you can cast a familiar spell and get a familiar, as was depicted in the monster section. Horrid Hunger, Uncontrolled Rage. Let's see what Horrid Hunger is. Hunger pangs assail the target. Make an intellect challenge roll against the target's will. On success, target becomes impaired for 1 hour. While impaired in this way, the target is also slowed. Target can remove the impaired affliction by spending 1 minute gorging itself. The food cannot belong to the target. At the end of this time, the target must get a success on a will challenge roll or gain 1 corruption. Attack roll 20 plus. The target also takes -5 penalty to health until it is no longer impaired. All right. Avarice, Unbridled Lust. Oh, interesting. Summon Gargoyle, Infernal Audience, Summon Tormentor. Really, who would want to summon a Tormentor? I guess if you have one of those Hellraiser cubes. Illusion spells. Protection spells. We got Diagram. Not sure what that does. You infuse the target's circle with magical power that lasts for the duration or until some time breaks the circle or until someone breaks the circle by smudging it, laying something over it, or erasing part of it. The diagram prevents any creature on it from moving outside the area it covers. Okay, so basically it's a trap. Using the diagram. So here we go. Diagram spell is useful for anyone who summons unwilling creatures to do their bidding. So that's pretty typical. I mean, you get that in literature and on Supernatural all the time, right? The show, TV show. All right, spiritualism spells, Hold to the Underworld. This area fills with darkness and clearly reveals a seemingly bottomless hole that randomly connects to the underworld, hell, or the void. Okay, so here you go. This is a way to create a temporary opening into hell. And what is that? That is a spiritualism utility 2. Really? Just utility 2? Okay. And then we get to the index. So that is it for Terrible Beauty, or not Terrible Beauty, for that's Terrible Beauty right there, for Exquisite Agony. This is a really dark book, and it's got a lot of horrible stuff in it, as we've just covered. But if you are wanting to do a campaign featuring hell, devils, and all that goes with that, then this book is a must-have. I mean, it's the writing is excellent, the ideas in here are excellent, and for the type of material that it contains, it's an excellent source book. So I can't say anything more than, buy this book if you want to have that type of campaign, or even if your campaign is in the mortal world but features things from hell and interactions with devils and stuff. This is a damn good book, so I would recommend it. Once again, you can find these things on DriveThruRPG, and they're very, very affordable. So good stuff. All right, so that's it. I've rambled on long enough. You're probably asleep by now, so wake up and go back to your normal lives and go pay attention to your families. You have spent entirely too much time listening to me ramble on. So I will let you go now, and I will be back with another episode at some point. But until then, peace out, dudes and dudettes and everything in between. All right, I'm out.